Welcome to Authors Alcove. This is Agnes Wolfe. Today I have best-selling author Mark Cheverton. He has written 27 books, 24 of them being Minecraft novels. And your latest one is Invasion of the Overworld?
That was my first Minecraft novel.
Oh, that is your first one. And what is your most recent one?
Facing the Beast Within.
All right, I can see it behind you. Everybody check that
There
one
it is.
Yes, great.
Who put that there?
It's so nicely displayed. What was your inspiration, first of all, just to be a writer?
So I thought about writing when my son was about 4 years old. And I thought, as kids, we learn from our parents by watching them, right? We emulate them. I want him to learn how to take risks, how to try hard things that you're probably going to fail at. You know, how to be willing to try something new and take a risk. Those are not traits that I have at all. So I thought, I'm going to write a book and make the character be like that. And it's going to be an awesome book because I'm going to work really hard. And I know nothing about writing a book, but I'm going to do it anyways.
And it was a complete success, correct?
It was a catastrophic failure. It cratered the earth. I wrote it, and I'm writing it for kids, mind you, and I know nothing about writing. Each chapter's like 80 pages long or something. And it ended up being 1,200 pages long. That's a little stiff for a kid's book, right? And I took it and thought it was great. I read it to him at bedtime. He said he liked it, though he slept through a lot of it. I was good at putting him to sleep. Probably not a good sign. And then I shopped around to get an agent because you can't get published unless you have an agent to go to a publisher for you. And so I started querying agents, and I think I received 253 rejections until I gave up on that one.
Oh, no.
253. And my son was learning graphing in school, and so he had a good time graphing that line as it got steeper and steeper and steeper. He thought that was a fun activity. I didn't enjoy that much, but he did. So then I wrote 3 more books. I decided 1,200 pages is too long for a 10-year-old. And so I made some short books, and I made them into a series, and I made my own covers, which when I look back are just horrendous, but what did I know? And I tried to get those published, and those were also complete failures. So that wasn't a lot of fun, but I learned a lot.
And since then, since your catastrophic failures, you are now a New York Times bestseller, a USA Times bestseller, a Publisher's Weekly bestseller, and you have now published 27 books, 24 of them being Minecraft novels, correct?
Yep. It certainly turned around a little.
That is so awesome. But what I actually am very interested about is the inspiration behind your most recent Minecraft series, specifically the first book, Invasion of the Overworld.
Right. So I wrote those 4 books, and the first 4 books, and I thought maybe all those people who told me no were right. I'm not good at accepting no. But I thought maybe about 500 no's are maybe they're correct. And I was ready to give up on writing until my son was cyberbullied while he was playing Minecraft. And it was really pretty catastrophic for him. It was really upsetting. And so he asked, what did I do wrong to make these boys treat me this way? He thought it was his fault. And I learned later, victims of bullying frequently think they did something wrong to deserve it. And I couldn't get him to understand that it wasn't his fault. So I thought, I'm going to write 1 more book. I know it's not going to be any good because my last 4 weren't any good, but I'm going to set it in Minecraft because that's what he's obsessed with. And maybe I can deliver the message to him. And so I wrote it, and we read it at bedtime, and he thought it was great. And so I thought, yeah, what the heck? I'll publish it, but I'm going to self-publish it on Amazon because I know I don't know how to get an agent. I proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt. And so I went ahead and I self-published it on Amazon, and it just blew up. It was the only novel about Minecraft at the time. Now there's hundreds, but at the time that was the first one, and kids were hungry. They're obsessed with Minecraft, and they wanted to read. And parents loved it because they wanted to get their kid off the computer. And so here they'd read a book about Minecraft, and they're not on the computer. Parents loved it.
So this particular book, though, you said that you was inspired by the fact that your son was bullied. Is that
right?
So what type of theme does it have? Does it incorporate the bullying in that?
So set it as the point of view of a character who's a bully. And why he's a bully and why he does these things. He does these things because he's picked on, because he's mistreated, and he feels like he has no control over his life. And it's very common, kids that are bullies will bully other people when they're bullied. And so I showed that character, but then showed the character finding the value of friendship and having people to work with and having people at your side. So it talks about bullying, but it also talks about the value of friendship.
And friendship is a very important theme, especially in that middle grade range. How do you address a topic as important as bullying to that age range, especially because they are in the crux of, or in the middle of all of that chaos of bullying, and they're very self-critical at that time, you know, because they're constantly trying to fit in, they're trying to build these friendships. How do you handle writing such a hefty
about that
theme?
So one thing I learned from the first 4 catastrophic failures was I developed a knack for making a book feel immersive, to make it feel like you're there with the character by sheer accident, not because I knew anything about writing, because my background is in physics. It's not in writing. So I don't know anything about it, but I just kind of fell into this and developed a method of doing it. And so I make the kid feel like they're there with the main character and they're feeling what they're feeling. But in addition, I have a good friend that I've known for years and years and years who's a child psychologist. And so I'd call up Jen and I'd say, hey, you know, I'm writing about bullying. What do you tell your patients? And so she would tell me the things about bullying that I never knew. But I would take those things that she tells her patients and I would put those into the book. And so I added that kind of therapeutic aspect to the bullying side of things.
I really love how you took it from the bully's perspective rather than from the person who's being bullied.
Yeah, the victim, right? Yeah.
Yes. And because I think that's a lot more telling about what really is going on, because when you are the one being bullied, you're constantly reflecting, okay, how can I change? How can I be different? So that way these people will accept me. And you don't realize, especially when you're young in that middle grade range, you don't realize that bullying is actually nothing about the person being bullied. It has to do with the person who's doing the bullying. And so that's what
right.
I love that you took that angle. But you also mentioned that your background is in physics. Son must be similar to you in the fact that he loves Minecraft. So you must have done a lot of world building. What was your world building like, especially writing about Minecraft?
So certainly when I was a kid, I was a voracious reader. And Saturdays were the best because I got to go to the library with mom and get some new books, right? That was the coolest. So I read tons of books, mostly science fiction and fantasy. And so I kind of drew on that experience to do the world building. But I also made the world building very sensory in that I didn't talk about just the landscape of Minecraft. I talk about the feel of the wind blowing across your skin and the sound of the pigs nearby oinking and the kind of things that you would see in Minecraft. I made those things visceral to the reader to make it feel like they're in there with the characters. And kids really like that from what they have told me.
You actually have quite the following that you have people even writing, or children writing fan fiction. Do you mind sharing some of that with us?
That was the weirdest thing ever. That this book went out and I self-published it and it sold 50,000 copies in the first 4 or 5 months, which covered Christmas. Which
that was self-publishing too, which is amazing.
That never happens, right? And so now agents and publishers started knocking on my door and saying, hey, do you want to be traditionally published? And I asked my son, do you think I should reject 253 of them first? And of course he said yes, because he thought that would be funny, right? So I said, no, I'm going to take them. And so that was a pleasant surprise. But then when it started selling even more, it made it to number 29 on Amazon's top 100, which was pretty cool. And so suddenly I started getting emails from kids because I put my website and I put the website address on. It's not hard to find. It's markcheverton.com. But they started sending me their own stories, which I thought was fascinating because when I was their age, I was terrified to write something and show it to somebody But when we're asked to write that horrific essay about Huck Finn that we all have to write, right? We might be wrong at what we write. We might be incorrect. And so that's, I think, part of the fear that people have about writing is that they might be wrong. And these kids, let me tell you, they know more about Minecraft than anybody else. And so they know they're right when they're writing about Minecraft. And I think that really reduces that barrier of fear to get them to write. And so they started writing their own stories. Some of them, they used my characters. Some of them, they made up their own characters. And I just started getting flooded with them. And so I made a page on my website for their fan fiction, and I started posting it there. And then what was cool is kids would start making comment on other kids' stories. Sometimes there were bullies, and all those comments had to be approved by me. And so when a bully came on and said something terrible, I blocked that comment and I banned them from my website so they could never come back. So it became a really safe place for kids to post their stories and interact with other kids about their writing. It was really fun.
That is so awesome. And so when you're writing about something that is already known, like a world that's already known, because kids know about Minecraft and I know nothing. I'm going to let you know that right now. I have no idea what Minecraft, like I have the basic idea of it because I've seen whatever. But how do you write a world that already exists when you're writing a story?
Well, I wrote the world that already exists. But what I did to make it interesting is I made it so all the monsters could talk and all the villagers who are built into the story could talk. Because if the main character is the only person that can talk, that's a tough story to write. And there's people who have done that. And I don't know how you do that successfully. So I used the world that exists, but I created a zombie king. And a king of the Overworld who was this mean creature called an Enderman. His name was Erebus, and kids love to hate Erebus. And so I gave the villain these great characteristics that the reader really hated so that they wanted to see him defeated. So I think the characters really added the color and flavor to the environment to really draw the kids into it. So it felt like something unique and not just another view of Minecraft.
That's awesome. So what are some other type of themes that you have chosen to write about? You know, it started with bullying. What has it progressed since then?
Yeah, so I started with bullying because of my son. And I realized when the book became successful that I have a soapbox here I can stand on and I can shout to kids and I can teach them what I want. And so the next one I wrote about facing your fears. And the next one was confronting anxiety. And the next one was sibling relationships. And went through and I decided what theme do I want to talk to kids about? And then I kind of wrote the story around that theme.
And how has children responded to the themes? Have they talked to you about the themes, or is it mainly just the fan fiction?
I've heard kids would email me. I'd get tons of emails and they'd say, you know, I was dealing with the same thing that Herder dealt with, and I'm so glad you wrote about that. But parents would also do that as well. In fact, I had one parent who contacted me who their kid was a Minecraft fan, and they said, I kind of become a therapist to kids, kind of. And I get asked some really uncomfortable questions that I don't want to answer. I want to redirect them to their parents, which is what I do. But this parent asked me, or she said, my son really loves your books, but boy, he only sees the negative in everything and he can't see the positive. And so I wish there was a way that, you know, you could do something. I don't know. And so that became the theme of my next book. And so I made the next book about having a character that only sees the negative, and they learn through the story that seeing the positive is a whole lot more enriching than seeing the negative. And then when it was done, I got a copy and I autographed it and I sent it to that parent for their kid.
So I see that book behind you, Facing the Beast Within. What is the theme in that particular book?
So that is focused on anxiety in kids because my son struggled with severe anxiety so severely that we had to pull him out of school and I had to quit my engineering job and stay home with him and homeschool him. Years after, he's now in college and he's learned how to cope with his anxiety. And I asked him one day, a couple of years ago, what did it feel like? What did those panic attacks feel like? I know what they looked like. You were crying and you were upset. What was on the inside? And he told me about the severe hopelessness and dread that was just hammering him. And it was just so horrific that I was stunned. I had no idea. I just thought he was upset. He didn't want to go to school. I thought, I need to tell other kids about this. Because when we were struggling with his anxiety, we knew other kids had anxiety, but when you're in the thick of it, all you see is yourself and your kid, and you feel like you're alone. And so I wanted other kids to know they're not alone with this. And so I wrote that book, and I gave the main character my son's anxiety symptoms. And I think kids have really responded to it very positively.
I think what you're doing is just absolutely amazing. I love that you're tying into something that kids are really already resonating with, the Minecraft, and doing it in such a powerful way. I really appreciate that. So what do you hope your readers walk away from reading your books?
Hope they walk away from them realizing, number one, they're not alone. Because when you're a child and you're struggling with depression or something, you don't know there's other people struggling with the same thing. And maybe when you're in the depth of that, you really don't care. But it'd be nice to know that your hero, the main character in my Minecraft books, was Game Night 999. You know, knowing that Game Night 999 is struggling with something you are, that's really empowering for a child to be able to know they're not alone and other people are just like them. And so I hope that's what kids see in the books, that there's someone out there like them that are struggling with what they're struggling with. Because I think that makes it a little easier to confront it.
What book or author has been a major inspiration in your writing journey?
I think Frank Herbert. So I read a lot of old science fiction, and I reread them from the 70s and 80s. Frank Herbert is by far my favorite. He wrote the Dune series that has been recently made into movies. He is just such an imaginative, spectacular author, where he devises his stories where each character has a character arc and is struggling to overcome some kind of problem. And he's able to masterfully weave these character arcs together so that in the end they all reinforce each other. It's just, he's an incredible author. I've read all of his books multiple times.
Awesome. So you, having had a catastrophic failure, according to yourself, and now are published in 31 countries, 27 books, and best-selling in USA Today, New York Times, Publishers Weekly, number 29 on the top 100 Amazon. What is one piece of advice that you would give to a not yet published author?
The thing I would give, well, when I go to writing conferences, it's common that I see young authors, young, well, compared to my gray hair, young meaning 20-something, and they're trying to get their first book published, and I'll hear them say, if I don't get an agent to look at the book at this conference, I'm just going to give up on writing. And they're writing their first book. And I would argue that most people, when they write their first book, know nothing about writing. Because what I learned is writing is a craft. You don't just decide one day to be a doctor, right? Or a podcast host. I mean, there's skills and there's tools you need to do these things. And it's no different with writing than it is with being a doctor or an engineer. You have to learn the tools. And someone who writes their first book and then gets rejected, which is typically the way it is with first book, if they give up, that they haven't really learned enough of the craft to be able to know that was their best shot. And so the advice I'd give to young writers or new writers is you need to commit to writing 3 or 4 books, because you learn so much from the process of writing and editing that you discover your voice, you discover what kind of rhythm you like in your sentences, you learn how to use sentence length as a tool. All of these things are in all of these books back here are all books on writing, because I'll sit in here and write, and those are my references. And there's so many things about writing that is not obvious that you need to learn, and you need to learn the craft, and you need to write multiple books before you give up.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I will have your links to your books in the show notes. I will have your website on there, and so people can check out your fan fiction and all of that fun stuff. I appreciate you being on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Authors Alcove. We will be back next week on Wednesday, where we will have a writer share yet another piece of work. Also, every other Tuesday, we do learn from experts such as editors, marketing execs, book cover artists, illustrators, and more. If you are interested in being a guest on our show, feel free to go to authorsalcove.com, go to the podcast tab, and then click on Be a Guest. If you're looking for a healed heart, hop on over to our sister podcast, Strength, Love, and Healing with Authors Alcove. You can find that on Spotify and the Apple Podcast. Thank you so much for listening today. Have a great day.